We did a number of different pranks, and they were quite different to the ones that I use in the book. But the name of the student was the same. That was actually the name. Amelia Westlake was the name that we came up with when we were in Year 12. What was kind invitation to your 18th birthday party? I would be delighted to attend. I look forward to seeing you there. And the person, Sally, would be saying, who on earth is Amelia Westlake and why is she coming to my party? We even entered an artwork by Amelia in the Year 12 art competition. It was a painting of a giant question mark, and we snuck in early one morning and hung it up with all of the rest of the Art Express wording paintings. And a funny thing happened. Once people realised Amelia was actually a fake student, they became completely obsessed with her, and they wanted to find out who she was. It became a sport of everyone in our year trying to trap her in the act. Now, because 3 of us had invented her, we were able to create alibis for each other, so we never ever got caught. And nobody at school ever found out who Amelia Westlake was. And then earlier this year, I published a book called Amelia Westlake, and now everybody knows. So you see, I've had an interest in this thing called fake news for a pretty long time. And so while researching the book, I learned a lot about hoaxes. I don't know how much time you guys spend looking at different hoaxes that are on the internet, but I spent a lot of time. It was probably a bit of procrastination, but I liked to call it research. There are a lot of things, obviously, that we know are hoaxes out there, like the moon landing, as if that ever happened. What I want to share, though, with you today are some things that you might not realise are hoaxes, but that I, as now an expert in hoaxing, have come to identify. So here are a few, and they might surprise you. Number 1 is cauliflower, the vegetable. Look, I didn't used to think much of it. I had a lot of boiled cauliflower when I was growing up, but recently I tried cauliflower soup, and it was so creamy. And that's when I realised cauliflower is only pretending to be a vegetable. It's actually a type of cheese. Number 2, mince pies. Now, after tasting one last Christmas, I thought, what's going on here? I tore it apart, had a good look between the sultanas, and there is not a skerrick of meat in those things. I'm declaring them a hoax. Number 3, finger buns. Now that is false advertising. They are not made of fingers, and I know this for a fact because they're not mentioned. Fingers are not mentioned once in the list of ingredients on finger buns. It's a hoax. Number 4, frequent flyer points. They're not a real thing. I've heard of people who have used them, but I'm telling you, if you basically have to fly to Mars to get a free trip to Dubbo, I'm calling the whole scheme a prank. Now my final, and this one I think is probably the most shocking, but my final hoax that nobody realises is a hoax is actually the United States of America. I mean, let's think about it. That is a completely ridiculous country that couldn't possibly exist. The people over there tip everybody all the time. They serve enormous food on plates that are too small for the food. They have drive-through banks, that's what I've been told.
drive-through banks, not just drive-through takeaway joints, but you go and you drive through to get your money out. They have grape-flavoured Skittles. They have peanut butter-flavoured everything. Their president is the kind of person nobody would ever vote for. There is no way that this country isn't made up. One interesting thing, though, that I've discovered about hoaxes is that they're neither good or bad in and of themselves. They can sometimes be used for evil, but sometimes they are used for good. In Amelia Westlake, Will and Harriet use their fake student to expose a lot of injustices that are happening at their school. So the fake Amelia Westlake exposes unfair marking practices, dodgy money-making schemes, and even sexual harassment. In my view, any sort of art has this potential to actually do good, including fiction. Now, the funny thing about fiction is that it is literally fake news, if you think about it. It says it right there in the name, fiction. We fiction writers effectively tell stories about characters and events that we made up. But here's the rub. Fiction is in fact a way to explore real things, real emotions, and highlight real truths about our world and about our lives. And this, I think, is what good books do. This is their job. So today, we're lucky to be celebrating some of the best books of the year. And on that note, it's time to move to the main part of the show. So what I'm going to do is welcome to the stage the student reviewers for the Older Readers Book of the Year category, who will come up now. We have Sakesh Patro, Liliana Edwards, Marwa Sultani, Callan Fan, Eleanor Ma, and Erin Gillane. Could you please give them a big round of applause?
Mallee Boys by Charlie Archibald is a sweet, touching novel set in the Mallee, located in rural Victoria. The story is about two brothers, Red and Sandy, in the year after tragically losing their mother. Mallee is vegetation that grows up and branches out onto nearby objects. Mallee is similar to the low-growing bushes and scrubs. The story is told in first person, with alternating points of view after every chapter. This gives the reader a real taste of life on the farm and life from a teenage male perspective. Red is 18 and gets angry quite easily. He has many unresolved issues and a lot of guilt building up since the death of his mum. Red has dropped out of school and has directed his efforts towards the farm. Wanting to escape the thoughts of his mother, he begins hanging out with Ryan, a skeptical character who eventually endangers everything Red knows. Sandy is 15, shy, and prone to accidents. He is self-reflective and loves to read. Sandy does well at school and is surrounded by good friends. Although the absence of his mum is on his mind, Sandy works hard to achieve a scholarship to a private school in Adelaide, complete his senior years there, and then become an engineer. Red and Sandy are raised by their father Tom, a generic yet pleasant father. Throughout the novel, Tom does his best to run the farm and support his boys simultaneously. However, the boys distance themselves, disallowing Tom to know what they are up to. Even though they don't talk much, they have each other's backs when it counts. Mallee Boys has perceptive references to country life. It references the local footy club, first loves, and how the boys dealt with grief, loss, and stress. With Tom's involvement in the town play being my favourite part, and Ryan my most disliked thing about the book, I'd give Mallee Boys a 8.5 out of 10. I recommend the novel to every teenager, but younger kids will also enjoy the read. As for gender, I think anyone can enjoy the novel. Charlie Archibald is an exceptional writer, and I really enjoyed reading her work. Thank you.
Good morning, guests, students, and teachers. I've been asked to review the book In the Dark Spaces by Callie Black, a book deeply rooted in family. This book tells the story of one girl's hardships and the strength she shows as she searches across the stars for the only family she has. The book follows Tamara, a stowaway in the Star Weaver, starship Layla, on her journey to find her baby cousin. Tamara was captured by the Crow people when the starship was attacked. They are studying her in her alien hive so that they can understand and use her. Tamara, now being called Weku by the Garawa Crow people, tries to understand their language and learn their ways to please the leader and try to find out any information she can about her cousin. Although Tamara is uncertain whether her cousin is even alive, she does all in her power to try and get back to him. The book portrays strong undertones of a novel deeply rooted in the idea of family, which works well in the book's favour. Most of Tamara's decisions and motivation throughout the book revolves around her family, starting off with her baby cousin to helping the Garawa after she builds a strong connection with them. The protagonist's motivation was believable and well written, with her standing out to me as an underdog of sorts. Someone who was unable to be heard, as she was thought of as less than the people around her, to a strong vocal heroine of sorts. Throughout the book, most of the characters are very well developed, especially with some of the Garawa that Tamara becomes close with. The story was unpredictable in the best ways. The twists weren't impossible or ridiculous. In fact, they were believable and strong when tied into the plot. The book does a good job of having tense moments stand out to you and affect you as a reader. I did feel as though, at times, the book drew out certain scenes too long, especially when it came to narration that wasn't vital to the plot, although I don't feel as though these scenes took away from the story as a whole. Overall, I enjoyed the book. With a story that made you not want to put the book down and likeable, motivated characters, Callie Black demonstrates her well-rounded talents as an author. Although it isn't the genre I would usually read, I found myself wrapped up in the story and caring about the characters' motivations and actions all the way through to the last chapters. The book is original and electrifying, and I believe that it is a book that can be enjoyed by anyone. Thank you.
Imagine all your favorite themes and ideas wrapped in one book, neatly placed on the library shelf, just waiting to be discovered by some totally mysterious yet amazingly awesome teenage girl. And cough, cough, you're looking at her. Now you may be thinking, what did this totally mysterious yet amazingly awesome teenage girl read? Well, I was given the opportunity to read and review Take 3 Girls by Kath Crowley, Simone Howell, and Fiona Wood. Before I continue, I would like to begin by saying, wow. I was intrigued, shocked, surprised, overjoyed, saddened, and every other emotion in between. Clem, Kate, and Addie, the main female protagonists, are truly inspiring and have been portrayed in a sophisticated yet relatable manner. Everyone will relate to at least one of the characters. Moreover, the hidden morals and themes allow the reader to gain a further understanding of the context of the book. The plot and subplots emphasize and raise awareness of the global issues teenagers face in society. Furthermore, the novel identifies a variety of strategies to support teenagers in crisis and gives them the ability to acknowledge the fact that they aren't alone. Now, I assume you're wondering, what does all this jargon mean? Well, let me break it down for you. Most authors understand the importance of taking into consideration how characters are portrayed and whether they will satisfy the reader's expectations. This book, however, takes its characters to another level. The complexity of the characters' personalities stunned me and entertained me throughout the whole book. To me, it was everything I could want. I actually loved how the 3 central characters allowed the responder to relate to more than one of them. When reading a book, most of the time you are able to relate to one or more of the central protagonists. In Take 3 Girls, you have the 3 characters to choose from. Clem, a swim star who loses her heart to the wrong boy, Kate, a brainy student wishing to pursue a music career, and Addie, who is not the typical A-lister she seems to be. The wide variety of personalities for the reader to relate to is a deliberate attempt to gain the responder's attention and appeal to them. Being an older reader, you may find a personal connection between one of the characters and the plot or subplots, and quite possibly find things you wouldn't normally find in a regular novel. There are multiple ideas hidden throughout the whole plot and subplots, which I love. The book also challenged my mentality and way of thinking. Because this book appeals to a range of teenagers, it sparks a link between the hidden ideas and society. For example, a theme within the novel is to not judge a book by its cover. This is reflected in everyday situations around the world, but in this book, it is used to show the diverse variety of students and how almost everyone is going through their own dilemma, whether visible or not. Finally, you can't have an amazing book without a purpose, can you? The whole point of writing a book is to show the reader something you're truly passionate about. This book intertwines the issues of the effects of gossip, inner conflict, identity, self-criticism, feminism, and belonging. One of the main themes was the effects of gossip. Not only did the book identify it as an issue, it demonstrated a key focus on reassuring teenagers that they have a wide range of support networks. Additionally, the novel engages the reader without them knowing that it is providing them with strategies on how to deal with these issues. For this reason, I have to commend these three award-winning authors for their effort and an amazing job of making this one of the most enjoyable teen fictions I have read. I'm not a qualified critic though, and in conclusion, I would like to recommend this book to all teenagers looking for a little twist on the usual book choices. This novel is definitely something you don't want to pass on, because in the end, the smiling, crying, and the criticizing will be all worth it, and as soon as you close the book, you'll be saying, I've read one of the most amazing teen fictions in my entire life. Thank you.
Look at the cover for Pip Harry's novel, Because of You. A simple house, an electrical pole with a note on it saying, Hope Lane Writing Group. How could this basic cover ever show such a part in such an amazing story? Why would this ever be chosen for a cover for a novel in the first place? I believe the answer to those questions is because it shows a home, and Tiny is homeless. Because of You follows the lives of two girls, Tiny and Nola. Nola is attending school in year 12, unsure and afraid of her future, while Tiny lives on the streets. But when Tiny goes to Hope Lane shelter, she enrolls into the writing group. And at the same time, Nola joins to fill her community service log, where the two meet. There are many other major characters in the novel, most of them writers in the group. These include Eddie, Drew, Pee-wee, and Hattie, as these are all members of the group. The themes of Because of You are hope, acceptance, friendship, and change, all things that affect everyone. Because hope is what drives you, acceptance and friendship support you, and change defines you. In Because of You, it's like Harry has absolute control over your emotions as you absorb the novel. You can't put it down to miss the drama and the magic of every single sentence. Highly recommended for ages 11 plus.
Good morning, distinguished guests, teachers and students. My name is Eleanor Ma. I am a student at Loretto Kirribilli in Year 10. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you today about the novel The Secret Science of Magic, written by Melissa Keel. Ms. Keel is a distinguished children's book editor and award-winning young adult writer. Her novel, The Secret Science of Magic, is a contemporary young adult romance novel set in Australia. The story focuses on two characters, Sophia and Joshua. Sophia is a child prodigy, but though she has a super brain, now in her late teens, she struggles, like many, with the cut and thrust of high school life. Joshua, also in his late teens, is an aspiring magician. He believes anything is possible. He is a geeky, intelligent, introverted great guy who is in love with Sophia. The Secret Science of Magic is like nothing I have read before, as the characters were so original and they both beat to the sound of their own drum. With a bit of romance and magic, I thoroughly enjoyed this novel, and I found myself relating to Sophia with her battle with self-knowledge, establishing herself in her school situation, and understanding her purpose as she endeavours through the twists and turns of high school life. As a Year 10 student, I'm beginning to understand the importance of some upcoming questions I will face within the next couple of years. And alike to Sophia, I feel I'm navigating my way around high school. But I feel reassured knowing that I have her at my side. The novel tugs at the heartstrings. You'll find yourself laughing out loud and aching at the heart as you join these two extraordinary individuals. I recommend this book to children aged 13 years and over, and it may even add a bit of magic back into your life. Thank you.
Ballad for a Mad Girl is a fantastic read, full of various genres. It's part contemporary, thriller, murder mystery, and supernatural horror. Just when you think you've gotten comfortable with the book, Vicky Wakefield heads in another direction. 2 years have passed since Grace Foley's mother died from an unfortunate car accident. It is not the first tragedy to occur in a small town of Swanston, as teenager Hannah Holt mysteriously died 23 years before the accident, rumoured to be at the hands of William Dean. The Foley family have moved from the family farm to a house in town, and 17-year-old Grace is struggling with the rules her suffocating yet distant father has set. Everything around her is changing: her friends, family, her sense of self. She holds on to her reputation as the town prankster. Grace is a highly emotionally reminiscent narrator to follow. She considers herself to be the hero and saviour of her friends, which include Amber, Gummer, Pete, and Kenzie. Quote unquote, "We were leftovers, only it didn't feel that way. It felt like we chose each other carefully to make sure all our odd shapes fitted together." While offering brief moments of introspection, Grace largely responds with anger and defiance, clashing with and hurting her friends, and raising the bar on her pranks. It would be just easy to be angry with Grace, but at the heart of her rage lies fear that Wakefield has beautifully understated, fear that her friends are moving on without her. While the quote on the back of the book, "At this rate, I won't survive high school. I'll be a dead, friendless virgin," gives the impression that one of Grace's core concerns is not being able to find her significant other. The book is more focused on her friendship dynamics, which is a refreshing change. Ballad for a Mad Girl deals with some pretty heavy-handed material, the death of Grace's mother and the impact her grief has on Grace's relationships with her friends and family. This is a significant book crafted by Vicky Wakefield.
Well, thank you all of you for your fantastic reviews. Can we give them another big round of applause? They were amazing. I think we really got a sense there of what those novels are about for those who haven't read them or have not read them all. I've read probably half of those novels, and I thought that they were very well represented by the reviewers. And they should all look into getting jobs at The Guardian or the Sydney Morning Herald, seriously. Now, we have a little bit of time, so I want you to have a bit of a chat to your neighbour again, but this time a chat about the books and which one has been your favourite this year on that particular shortlist. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do so and exchange ideas. All right. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a bit of a chat, work out your own personal favourites, pick the winners. I hope you've all picked a winner in your head, because that's always fun. Thinking about who the winner might be before we find out. Now, there's a little bit of time to go yet. And at this point, I would like to welcome the primary schools joining us through the live stream. A big welcome to all of you who are watching remotely. My name is Erin Goff, and the live audience here is about to give you a big, loud round of applause. We're having a lot of fun, as you can hear. Okay, now it gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Dianne Wolfer, to the stage. Dianne is the acclaimed author of books spanning multiple genres for teenagers and young readers. Her book, Lighthouse Girl, served as inspiration for Piaf's The Giants, featured in events commemorating the centenary of the departure of the first AIF from Albany, and has recently been adapted for the stage by Black Swan State Theatre Company. One of Dianne's picture books, Photographs in the Mud, set along the Kokoda track, is used as an international peace reference and has been published in Japanese. It is also a recommended resource for the National History curriculum. Her young adult title, Choices, has been translated into Polish. Could you please welcome Dianne?
Thank you so much. Now, is the clicker? Do we have the clicker? Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful. Right. I'm so impressed by those reviewers. How articulate were they? Bit of a tough act to follow. Thank you. Thank you to the CBCA for your passionate support of children's literature, and thank you to everyone for coming along today. I'm so pleased to be here with you to celebrate the start of Book Week, and today I'm going to talk about how I found the treasures that inspired me to write my historical stories. Okay, I love being an author. 3 months ago I was in Harefield, a small village north of London, launching In the Lamplight, the third story in my Light series. Then last week, I was in Broome, near the setting of in northwest Western Australia, the setting of my latest book, The Dog with Seven Names. Both places provided me with all sorts of treasure and fresh story ideas. I have two kinds of favourite books, animal stories and historical fiction. My latest titles include both. In the Lamplight is set in World War I and links to a well-travelled wallaby mascot. The Dog with Seven Names is set in World War II and is anthropomorphic. That means that the book's written from a dog's point of view. And I'm not sure why I write about war a lot. I think it's because it brings out the best and the worst in people. In 1942, there was just one non-army doctor for all of Western Australia's Pilbara and Kimberley regions, which is a huge chunk of the top of Western Australia. Over 900,000 square kilometres, and that's bigger than all of New South Wales. So one doctor. During World War II, towns in northwestern Australia were bombed, and so women and children were evacuated inland or south to Geraldton and Perth for safety. The Dog with Seven Names began when I was reading something interesting about that one flying doctor. He was bringing a patient from Marble Bar, so the Port Hedland Hospital had been evacuated inland. The doctor was bringing a patient from Marble Bar to Port Hedland in a small single-engine aeroplane, a little BA Swallow. And as the doctor came into land on the dusty Port Hedland airstrip, he saw 6 enemy fighter planes coming straight at him, and he was just in a little BA Swallow. For some reason, the Zeros didn't shoot him down. The pilots were looking into the morning sun, so perhaps that's why they might have thought he was a Spitfire. But they did shoot up the airstrip. I wanted to explore this frightening time in Australia through story, but I couldn't use a child hero. They'd been evacuated south. And so I thought, what about if I put a little dog in the plane? There probably wasn't a dog in the Flying Doctor's plane, but in my story there is. The joy of being an author. The central character of The Dog with Seven Names is a sweet little canine of terrier dingo descent. When the dog's beloved owner Elsie has to be evacuated south, she's given to a stockman and then to the flying doctor. Telling the story from a dog's point of view let me use different senses and also to bring out some humour in some of the more scary parts. So here's just a little bit of that. The drone of engines coming towards us, the aeroplanes sounded different to fox, moth, swallow and Electra. I nosed the air, sensing danger, but not understanding. The engine's sound grew louder. My before the branch fell feeling returned and I howled. Doc stared into the distance. Then his breathing quickened. He swore and suddenly Swallow dipped. I wobbled and fell against Arunta's arm. He flinched. What's happened? He asked. Over there, Doc pointed. See the planes? Arunta held a hand above his eyes and I smelt the boy's fear. Bombers. It's a whole ruddy squadron. Everett's voice babbled a warning over the radio. Doc jerked the controls. We need to get higher, he shouted. With the sun behind us, those pilots might think we're a Spitfire. Arunta's good arm clutched my chest, squeezing the breath out of me as Swallow dipped and circled. The planes growled closer. I saw clouds puff up from the runway below. They're giving the airstrip a pasting, cried Doc. Swallow climbed higher. She was straining. My ears hurt. Hold on, Doc called. There wasn't enough air. I panted and fell against Arunta's shoulders. They drooped. We needed the oxygen bottle. Arunta's head flopped onto mine, and as we drifted between sleep and waking, memories flowed between us. My golden eyes saw Arunta hunting, splashing in wet season creeks with friends. Then I saw Elsie. Doc swerved down and flew in circles, checking the sky below. At last he yelled, "They've gone!" As Swallow flew lower, we all gulped air. So that's the scene that started the whole book. Going to the places where my stories are set is important. It adds layers. I like to find out about the sounds and smells and textures of a place. This was especially important for my Dog with Seven Names, and so when I was way out from Marble Bar looking for the secret Corunna airstrip, I got down close to the ground to sniff and listen. There was no one around. I heard the sounds of insects, like there was really no one around. I'd seen no one for the whole day. I've been driving for hours. So it didn't matter that I was down there on the red dirt sniffing about. But all I could hear was the sound of insects and the wind blowing through the spinifex. But those were things that I could then add into my book. Sometimes the smells weren't good, animal droppings or roadkill. But I guess a dog would like that. These are photos of Marble Bar, where the hospital was evacuated inland to, and of me driving out to try and find the Corunna Downs secret World War II airstrip, where huge American liberators flew every night on bombing raids. I got within 6 kilometres and then a creek foiled me. I also went to Broome to find out more about the flying boats that were strafed in Roebuck Bay. Over 80 women and children died in this raid, and at super low tide you can still see the aeroplane wrecks. To make the most of the very short low tide time, I went out to the wrecks in a hovercraft, which was really fun, and was amazed to find that another lady in our group was the daughter of one of those Dutch pilots. This is his plane up the top there. Serendipity, or lucky coincidences, can be a magical part of the writing process. When serendipity happens, I always stop and pay attention. It's important to be ready to find treasure. There were also coincidences when I was writing my Light series. Faye, the lighthouse keeper's daughter's birthday, was the same day war was declared. Ships from Eastern Australia came into Albany on my birthday. Before Faye's sister died, she lived in the house in the street below me. Lighthouse Girl began in 2005. I was having breakfast and happened to read this article in the Weekend Australian, which I have. So, I was reading this article. I didn't know that in 1914, troop ships from across Australia had all gathered in Albany, where I live, for a few days to take on supplies. I didn't know about this massive convoy of 36 ships with accompanying battleships. As I read it, I came to this little part that I've highlighted. And it says, Perth man Don Watson tells of his mother, Faye Catherine Howe, there she is, Daughter of the Breaksea Island lighthouse keeper, she was just 15 and stood on the island signalling to the departing fleet, almost certainly the last human contact with Australia. Numerous postcards came back to Albany from the Middle East addressed to the little girl on Breaksea Island, and it was that little girl on Breaksea Island that captured my attention. Many soldiers on the ships had been away from home for weeks. They'd come from Queensland, from New South Wales, Tassie. They wanted to send final messages to their families before leaving Australia, so they put notes into bottles that washed up on Albany beaches, and they were on scent. Then some men saw Faye and they knew that she had access to the telegraph line, you know, that old-fashioned doot-doot-doot-doot. And so they signalled to her, probably using big semaphore flags to spell out their words. They wanted her to relay their messages. We don't know how many messages Faye forwarded or how many postcards were sent back to thank her, but Faye's son Don, who I eventually did find, says he remembers reading dozens of cards when he was a boy. While I was researching Faye's story, I came across this photograph in the Australian War Memorials collection, and I wondered, why was there a kangaroo with the troops in Egypt? Does anybody know? Yes? Mascot, well done. They took animal mascots. And I found the Turkish soldiers also had mascots with them, so that common humanity interests me. I found more animal photos and learnt that most World War I units had an animal mascot over different armies. There were dogs, cats, a rooster, a goat, and even one poor koala, which wasn't a bit sad. So this is something that just captured my imagination, all of these animals going off to war. Then I started reading about the horses, and I found out that of all the 136,000, approximately, Australian horses that went to World War I, only one returned. That horse was Sandy, the favourite charger of Major General Bridges. The Major General was shot at Gallipoli, and his dying wish was that Sandy would come home at the end of the war. That started Light Horse Boy. In 1918, Sandy did come home. The big bay lived the rest of his days in a paddock at Maribyrnong in Melbourne and died in 1923. There was another weird coincidence linked to this book. A year after Light Horse Boy was published, the National Anzac Centre opened in Albany. I went along to see the exhibitions, and just as I came to the end, I saw this strange silver-plated hoof. I read the inscription, and guess what? Sandy's hoof has found its way to my hometown. It sits in a cabinet, and I can visit it as often as I like and remember this special horse. Serendipity again. In the last few years, Lighthouse Girl and Lighthouse Boy have been adapted for the stage. Black Swan Theatre's show, The Lighthouse Girl, had sell-out performances in Albany and Perth last year and then toured towns across Western Australia. I hope Black Swan's adaptation will also come over here to tour the eastern states one day, hopefully. When people turn your stories into something new, it's a super exciting kind of treasure. Faye from Lighthouse Girl was also the inspiration for an amazing street theatre production called The Giants. Faye's son, Don Watson and I, there's Don up the top there, Don Watson and I followed the little girl giant, who's actually huge, through the streets of Perth. And Don kept saying, "I can't believe my mother is a giant." So, In the Lamplight is the final book in my Light series, and a very different animal appears in this story. I didn't plan to write a third Light book. In 2013, I was in London for a short stopover. On my one spare day, I caught the train to the little town of Harefield to visit the grave of Bill Hitchens, an Australian soldier that I'd been researching. Bill and his brother organised the Gilgandra Cooee March. Their journey began in Gilgandra in October 1915, when new recruits were needed to replace the men who'd died at Gallipoli. Bill and his brother began the long trek to Sydney, calling, "Cooee, come and join us," at towns and villages along the way. By the time they reached Sydney, there were 263 men. I included Bill in my book and hope to write more about his story one day. Once I reached the Harefield area, I needed to catch a bus, and they were really weirdly signposted. But that led to a conversation with a Harefield local. She offered to show me the Anzac Cemetery, and so I did get to go and visit Bill's grave. I also learnt that in 1915, an Australian family living in Harefield had donated their manor home for the care of wounded Australian soldiers. Their home grew to become a hospital, and during the war, around 50,000 soldiers had been treated there in Harefield. Sadly, some also died. As well as Bill's grave, there are another 110 soldiers and one nurse from World War I buried in Harefield's Anzac Cemetery. The villagers feel a strong connection with Australia, and each day on Anzac Day, local school children follow the path of the World War I funeral processions. They walk down through the village carrying flowers, and they put the flowers on the graves of the Australians that are buried there. They've done this for over 100 years. So if you go to the village of Harefield, even the adults, they all have this connection to Australia because as children, they also did that walk through the village. That friendly villager, Linda, who helped me with the buses, took me to the now famous heart and lung hospital that had grown out of that small hospital. I walked around, looked at the photographs in their Anzac collection and discovered another marsupial treasure. Linda told me that a wallaby mascot named Jimmy had lived at Harefield Hospital during the war. And given my fascination with World War I animal mascots, I needed to find out more. That led to me writing in the Lamplight. I learnt that Jimmy was the mascot of the Australian 3rd Division. Before leaving for battlefields in France, the soldiers left Jimmy in the care of hospital volunteers. In this photo, Jimmy, in one, he's with the band, in the other, he's with Nancy Birdwood, daughter of the famous general. Incidentally, she met and married a West Australian airman, and they settled near my home in Albany. Another serendipity item and another one on my story writing bucket list. Jimmy loved to hop around the village, but that also led to his eventual downfall. Besides Jimmy's adventures, In the Lamplight is about the experiences of women during the war years, their roles as suffragettes, nurses and munitions workers. The story is told through the eyes of Rose, a village girl who cares for Australian patients, and there's an overlapping character, Jim, from Lighthorse Boy. An important theme of the book is resilience. Whilst researching this story, I kept hearing about the positive spirit of the Australian soldiers and nurses who used to gather on the village green. In these photos, you can see soldiers and nurses playing cricket, and you might see that one of the guy batting is missing a leg. And the photo next to that, the man's hands have been blown off in a blast, but he's teaching himself to write again. So that resilience kept coming, the have-a-go spirit kept coming again and again. So I wanted also to include details of the Spanish influenza pandemic, which caused more deaths than all of those who died in all the battles of World War I. So many interesting things, not all of them happy. Brian Simmons has illustrated all of the light books, and he is a living treasure. With just a stick of charcoal and an eraser, Brian manages to create these amazing illustrations, and they're really, really big. Letters, diary entries, telegrams, and old photographs have also helped me tell my characters' stories through different layers, through words and images, like a collage kind of a thing. But bringing together these layers is challenging. It usually takes me 100 drafts at least to get these light stories right. It takes years and is kind of like an iceberg. The book is what you see above the water. Underneath, holding it up, is the research and dozens of drafts. A favourite part of my research is finding real-life historical treasures that link to my books. Things that I can smell and touch help bring history to life. Some of the archival treasures I've found are World War I postcards and horse leggings. Okay, these are World War I postcards. These are not the ones that were sent to Faye. Sadly, they've probably been lost to history. But these are World War I postcards, and some of the messages on the back are amazing. You're welcome to come and have a look at them afterwards. But probably my favourite is this one. Okay, anyone want to have a guess what this is? What do you think? Exactly, it's a horse legging. Well done. Are you a horse rider? Yeah. So I've got 4 of them, but I actually win the coming the furthest prize, I think. But because I'm flying, I had to keep my luggage down. So having things like this, things that I can feel and touch and smell, smells a bit like 100-year-old horse, really helps bring history to life. There's little bits of fur. Again, if you're gentle and careful, you can have a look and touch and sniff this if you want to. Looking at this, I can have a look and think, I think the soldier whose horse had this must have really loved his horse, because it's been patched and sewn, and you can't just go down to the shop and buy more of those once you're over in the Middle East. So things like that really bring history to life for me, and they're things I look out for. I've also got some good shark things that link to shark caller, but it doesn't fit this speech. Interviewing people is also really important. In this photo, I'm with Don, like the lighthouse keeper's daughter Faye's son Don's wife, and his daughter. That's who I'm with. I'm with Don's wife and lighthouse girl Faye's granddaughter, looking at Faye's gloves. So I could have a look. I didn't see these till recently, after the book was long written. But she had such tiny hands. We seem to be getting bigger and bigger each generation. But it's magical to me to know that she wore those. It's a real treasure. I've now published 18 books for young readers. The journey's been a long and winding one, a journey with treasures, troubles and serendipity along the way. Sometimes it's a physical journey. In 2002, I walked the Kokoda track to research a YA novel. I went with a small group. Back then there weren't many people doing the trek. And the father of two of the men in our group was in hospital in Melbourne. He'd fought with the 39th Battalion and he was very ill. He was in hospital and his brothers and their sons were doing the trek to honour him. At each battle site we heard stories, and as we passed a large tree stump, I learnt that a Japanese soldier had hidden there during World War II. After a terrible battle with one-on-one fighting with an Australian soldier, which led to them rolling down this really steep hill and become just there, they were alone in a ditch. Just the Japanese and the Australian soldier. The Japanese man, Mr. Nishimura, survived, but said that he never forgot the eyes of that Australian soldier. As I hiked, I thought about common humanity, and the image of those two soldiers from different armies stayed with me. And that sparked an idea that became photographs in the mud. So you can see treasures can be found in all sorts of places if you watch out for them, even in the mud on a jungle track. They're all around us. I was okayish at school, but never top of my class. I was more like the muddle-headed wombat, a character that always made me laugh. Whoops, let's go back to him. But I loved hearing stories and reading books. I worked hard, and over time, I found that treasures can also be found inside us. And I learnt that I had two particular gifts, determination and imagination. Determination ensured that I didn't give up my dream of becoming an author, despite plenty of rejection slips along the way. Imagination is perhaps my greatest treasure of all, and something I believe we need to foster in ourselves. I'd like to finish by mentioning one more treasure, a very special flag that after 100 years still links Harefield and Australia. It's the flag that was draped over the coffin of the first Australian soldier to die at Harefield Hospital. During the 1916 funeral procession of young Private Wakefield, the school principal that was there watching the procession go down the hill, the one that the villagers now make each year on Anzac Day, and he was very sad to see the bare coffin going by. So he wanted to show respect. So he ran back into the school, he grabbed a flag, Union Jack flag, off the wall of the classroom, and he ran back to drape it over the coffin of Private Wakefield. This flag was then used in all of the funeral processions afterwards, so 112. And at the end of World War I, that when the hospital was closing down in 1919, that flag was given to the last fellow in charge, and they said, please give it to a school in Australia. And because Adelaide High School had donated lots of things for the war effort, for the soldiers, that flag went back to Adelaide High School. And they still have it. It's been hanging in their foyer for 100 years and was starting to crumble. So it's a few years ago had restorative work and hopefully will last another 100 years. So that remains as a mark of friendship between our countries. Animals can also build bridges between communities, I've found. I've still got a couple of minutes, so I'd just like to finish by reading something fun, something about Jimmy, Jimmy the Wallaby. All right, so this is from In the Lamplight. 11th of October, it's Rosa's diary. Something amazing happened today. Troops of the Australian 3rd Division have given Jimmy, their wallaby mascot, to us for safekeeping. He's hopping around the hospital gardens and sometimes even strays into the village. Life at Harefield becomes more and more strange. 5th of November. Bessie's gunner sweetheart returned to Australia, but she's lost her heart to another patient. He's from the cyclist corps and his legs are badly gashed. Sister says they'll heal, especially if Bessie keeps visiting him. While Bess spends her spare time mooning over him, I sit with our mascot Jimmy. His gentle brown eyes have the loveliest long lashes. 12th of November 1916. Jimmy makes me laugh. He hops with the brass band during processions and bounces about when they perform for patients. When the drums boom, he leaps sideways, bringing a smile to the face of even the weariest soldier. Jimmy is appearing at our next concert. The program says, Jimmy, we'll do something. And we might leave it there. Being an author can be frustrating, but it's a job I love. And I do get to find treasure in unexpected places. Thank you so much to the hardworking members of CBCA in branches across the country. I know today's a special day for all of us. You are super sparkly literacy warriors, treasures, all of you. And to all of the students, I hope that you find the gifts within you, whatever your own treasures may be. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dianne. Now, before you leave the stage, I might actually see if we've got, because we do have a couple of minutes.
Okay, great.
So I might see if anybody has any questions for Dianne before we say goodbye to her. Okay, we've got one here. Yes.
Oh, goodness, so many, dozens of cats, dogs, and so many kinds of dogs. Goat, koala. There was a cockatoo that ended up at Harefield Hospital, and it, you know, when soldiers have shell shock and loud noises scare them, this cockatoo had a bad habit of imitating a Turkish bomb blast. So it would just suddenly go, whatever that sound is, and the poor old shell shocks didn't like it at all. So birds, possums, pretty much any animal you can think of. And what was really amazing, when I went to Gallipoli and went to the Turkish museums, I saw in the Turkish trenches, they had all their little animal mascots as well. There's something about animals that we can connect to, I think. Thanks for the question.
One over here.
Yes. Oh, good question. Whose point of view? I tend to write from different points of view in the same book. So it's the storyteller, third person point of view, but then it also goes into her journal. So it alternates, not alternating each page, it varies a little bit. So there's the storyteller voice, the overarching third person, but then there's also the diary accounts, which are first person, which allows me to get into her head in a different way. It's great. I did that in Lighthouse Girl as well. Lighthorse Boy, when I tried to write from a young man's point of view, even though I'd read hundreds of diaries, I couldn't get it. So I made that one, the first person is him writing letters back to his sister, and suddenly I could capture his voice. Yes, have we got time? Yeah. Oh, what inspired me to start writing about historical stuff? I love it when I find some little interesting snippet, like the Flying Doctor coming into land and then seeing those zeros and surviving. A little snippet that people don't know a lot about is best, because then I can use my imagination. So I have ideas book full of, I've got so many ideas. I think I'm just curious and imaginative. So are you like that as well? Yeah, so just keep notes of everything. I've got many notes than I could ever write. Okay, how about, yeah.
What was your very first story called?
Oh, my very first story, I was in year 3, and it was called Plinky Pig. I go out to schools a lot, and some of them are like way out all over the place. And I think I left Plinky Pig in a remote community somewhere. It was a cliche love story about 2 pigs. And because I didn't think a lot about the ending, and I'm not an illustrator, so it starts off, I'm colouring in so much pink, pink pigs. But I got tired, and so after a while, the pigs are not very well coloured in. And then the story just peters out. So what I've learned, when I get an idea, I think about my final scene, and I think, where do I want my characters to be? And I think Plinky Pig taught me that. But my first published book was in '95, a long time ago, Dolphin Song, which I think is only available as an ebook now. So. But you can start now. Lots of authors are published. Well, some are. What about way up the back? What about, yeah?
When you started writing a book, do you just immediately know what to write, or do you does it take time for you to write?
It takes me years, but I think there's no one method that's correct. I'm sure we probably maybe write the same or maybe write differently. The important thing is to find what works for you, and I tend to keep my ideas in a plastic sleeve folder, and then I do more research, and everything to do with that idea gets put into a plastic tub. But the important thing is just get to the end of your story, and I think also don't try and go too big. Like Photographs in the Mud is set on the Kokoda track, but it's about one moment between two men. If I tried to write the whole campaign, it would have been too difficult. So try and keep it simple. Yes, and the girls, one of the girls behind. My animal, which is my favourite animal? Oh, goodness. Well, I just think Jimmy, because he's in the book. So, and I love him so much. And there's a whole thing about his name that I found out. Last one with the girl, yeah? Oh, people often ask me this. It's like I have a large family and I like them all in different ways. I think because these are my two latest books, so at the moment I'm particularly fond of them, but it's usually the one that's in my head, which is my favourite. But it's like if you came from a family, one's the cheeky one, one's the sensible one, one's the wise one. I think they all have a place, just like you all do. Thank you.
Thanks again, Dianne, for that fascinating talk. Such an interesting number of stories you told us today, and you've clearly had a very interesting writing journey. I particularly enjoyed listening to you read from your work. Such beautiful words, and it really does evoke that sense of place and smell and sound, which is what I love to read when I'm writing. Okay, now it's the time has come to announce the winners of the older readers category. You've all been very patient. We're going to pretend none of you saw that so I can make a very big announcement. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the winner of the older reader category for 2018 is Take 3 Girls by Kath Crowley, Simone Howell and Fiona Wood. And I'm sure after that wonderful review that we heard this morning of that book, we will all, if we haven't already, we will be rushing out to read that book. Okay, now we also have 2 honour book announcements in the older reader category. The first honour book is Mallee Boys by Charlie Archbold, and In the Dark Spaces by Callie Black is the other honour book. And congratulations to all of those authors. I hope they're having a wonderful time in Queensland, I think is the celebrations today. So it's actually time now to say goodbye to our high schools who are joining us through the live screen. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us today, and the live audience is going to give you a big wave, a big cheery wave, and say goodbye very loudly. Goodbye. Wonderful. Okay, now it's time to move on to the next part of our event this afternoon. And I can say this afternoon now because it's just past 12 o'clock. It's time to welcome to the stage the student reviewers for the Younger Readers Book of the Year category, who will come up now as I introduce them. So we have Ansh Gunay, Laura Vanderord, Ashka Batt, Josie Bradfield, and Katya Zeluk, as well as Lara Bartzi. Could you please give them a warm welcome?
Hi, do you like elephants? Because I'll be talking about the book, The Elephant, by Peter Carnavas. Oops, I almost forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ansh, and I have to say, this book is so emotional, interesting, and engaging. I mean, when I started reading, I didn't even realize I was reading for 30 minutes. Now I would like to introduce some of the wonderful characters. There's Olive, she's the main character. There's Arthur, Olive's best friend. There's Granddad, he's described as a scarecrow. And Dad, he has depression, and Olive imagines him having an enormous grey elephant standing next to him all the time. So she tries to cheer him up. But I have to say, The favorite part of this book for me has to be when it was the school's 100th birthday. Yeah. And Olive's class was up on stage. They were presenting their old and wonderful things, and it was Olive's turn. She came up and sang a song that her granddad sang to her all the time. Once she finished, she said, "Now for my favorite old and wonderful thing ever. Granddad, can you please come up on stage?" That was such a heart-touching moment. So Granddad picked her up and hugged her tight. There's also a really important message in this book. Olive couldn't move the elephant by herself. It took the help of Granddad and Arthur, her best friend, to make her dad happy again. It took teamwork and determination to make her dad happy again. Talking about your feelings is a really good habit. I recommend this book to all your 3 and above readers. It is such a heart-touching, monumental, and so much more. I can't explain it in words. You just have to read the book The Elephant to understand.
How to Be is a wonderfully descriptive novel, written by Bren MacDibble about Australia in the not-too-distant future. It is about a world where there are no bees. How do people get fruit, you might ask? How can we have an apple a day if there are no apples? How can we have our avocado toast if there are no avocados? Or our banana bread in the morning if there are no bananas? A reference this book makes is to apricots, reminding me how much I love apricot tarts. Well, in this heartwarming novel, the bravest, swiftest, and most nimble kids climb into the fruit trees to pollinate all the flowers by hand. In doing so, this book helps remind us how much the world relies on humble bees to pollinate all the flowers so they may develop into fruit and feed us. Aspiring to be one of these kids is the main character, Peony, a feisty protector of her family life on a fruit farm with her Gramps and younger sister Magnolia. Thus, when her city-living mother travels to the country with intentions of taking Peony back to help work for more money, Peony manages to give her the slip. But rather than outsmart her mother, she soon realizes that her sister would have to take her place. What follows is the story of Peony trying to get home from the city. Along her journey, she helps 14-year-old Esmeralda overcome her fears of the outside world. And as Peony's story evolves and takes you on her journey, her fierce love and longing and of course sassy voice will stay with you long after the last page. Bren MacDibble was raised on several farms in New Zealand, so it's no surprise that she uses her first-hand knowledge about the country so beautifully. My only small dislike about the book is that most of the speech is written in slang, but you soon get used to it. I highly recommend How to Be from Year 2 onwards more than an apple a day. Thank you.
Why? A question you often hear from a child's mouth. The why this is and the why that's never escape your mind. Henrietta and the Perfect Night is a book full of whys. The author Martine Murray has written this book from a child's point of view, and that is an extremely challenging thing to do after you've grown up. The book is quite pleasant and exciting to read. It is a short but interesting tale. Though this book is all about adventure, it can also be classified into the genre of humour. If you want something that'll loosen you up, Henrietta and the Perfect Night is the perfect book for you. Henrietta and the Perfect Night is about a girl aged around 5 to 6 called Henrietta and the world around her. While she waits for her younger sibling, she tries being a big sister, goes to school as a spy, gets a part in a play, goes to her cousin's house for the weekend, and meets a golden brown puppy on the way. However, a book is not a book without a problem. Henrietta really wants the puppy, but they suddenly have to drive home. Henrietta desperately wants to complain, but when she sees that all her family members around her are really happy, she doesn't, and of course, she is rewarded. The book is simple and easy to understand. There is no high vocabulary used, so no matter what age you are, you can read it. I wholeheartedly enjoyed reading this book. Though it is fantastic and I strongly suggest you read it, there was something missing, and that for me was a suspense. As the book is full of humour, questions, and adventure, it is hard to add suspense, but for that reason I rate it a 4 out of 5. I believe Martine Murray has done an excellent job in writing Henrietta and the Perfect Knight, and it was an almost perfect book.
Between 2016 and 2017, 133,000 migrants and refugees permanently moved to Australia. A girl with an angel-like voice and a wild imagination was amongst them in the story Martine Murray has created, titled Marsh and Me. Joey lives with his family in a small town with kangaroos and a hill that he calls his own. With a passion for first men of modern history, Joey M. Green seeks discovery and destiny, but fears that he is not good at anything. Looking quietly to his own father, he sees a sporty man who can create beautiful wooden sculptures and can fix almost anything. His poetry-loving mother describes Joey as a sensitive and nice kid. Joey never speaks to anyone new until he finds that a girl has taken over his private hill. She is so secretive, she won't even tell Joey her name, so he calls her Marsh, short for Martian. Marsh is strange, a refugee from war-torn Serbia. She thinks in a way no one else does and is fierce and resilient. Joey is the complete opposite, gentle, understanding, white Australian, reasonably wealthy and logical. His little sister loves him and his parents care for and treat him so well. Joey brings Marsh food with no thank yous, just shrugs in return. Marsh doesn't seem that interested in Joey until they create a song together. The result of Joey's gentle but persistent actions, these two completely different people come together through music and stories. As a reader, you are always urging Joey to keep trying new things and speaking to new people. You want Marsh to let out her secrets and be more clear in the difference between her real and imaginary worlds. Through their friendship, these two are able to encourage and find the confidence to challenge themselves and try new things. I recommend this book as a read aloud or a class text for students years 3 and up. This book has a great build-up and an intriguing twist at the end.
Emily Rodda, or Jennifer Rowe, needs no introduction. She's one of the most well-known writers across Australia. She's written countless books and series, such as the Del Toro Quest series, The Magic Key, and Pigs Might Fly. But today, I'll be talking about her newest release, The Shop at Hooper's Bend. This story is about an 11-year-old girl named John Quill, or Quill for short. Quill's parents died in a car accident, and she now goes to boarding school, but spends her holidays with her aunt or at summer camp. On the way to summer camp, Quill is drawn to a little town called Hooper's Bend and a shop she sees on the train. She absconds from the train and finds Bailey, a rather grumpy but kind-hearted lady who owns a scruffy dog called Pirate. The shop at Hooper's Bend is loosely based on a real shop, which once belonged to Emily Rodda's great-uncle, Tom Rodda. The shop upon which this story is based still sits on the highway at Bullaburra in the Blue Mountains. Emily had worked there as a child and had found it almost as homely as Quill did. Just as Emily has always felt a connection with the shop, Quill finds herself drawn to this funny little shop and a desire to belong there. As you progress through the book, you get a real sense of Hooper's Bend, which could be any little town in Australia, a place where everyone knows each other and there is a real sense of community. Each character is purposeful to the story, but it is Quinn and Bailey who are written about in such a way that you feel like you knew them and they could have easily been your neighbour. There are so many mysteries about Hooper's Bend that are unsolved. It is fun to join Quill, Bailey and Pirate the dog as all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together. She discovers an abandoned country store at Hooper's Bend. The busy highway which runs right through the shops serves as a constant signal that change is coming and trouble is brewing. For much of the book, Quill and Bailey are kept busy thwarting scheming agendas to buy and bulldoze the shop. Hooper's Bend is a country full of hospitality, but also holds plenty of secrets. Quill's sharp wits prove instrumental in helping solve the mystery at the centre of the novel. The Shop at Hooper's Bend is a satisfying read for both young and old, with its timeless tale about new life, new hope, and new beginnings. I would recommend this book for 9 years and up, particularly for those who have always enjoyed Emily's books. Thank you.
The Grand Genius Summer of Henry Hubler by Lisa Shanahan. Everybody loves the beach, the sand, the sea creatures, a camp with your family. We all think it's a wonderful experience to treasure and look forward to. But could a vacation on a beach be a horrifying event that should have never arrived in this world? Maybe it's a nightmare in real life with a danger sign ignored. Maybe it's the worst experience. You want to go quickly, but the seconds turn into the minutes. Minutes turn into hours. The hours into days. Who thinks that exactly? Meet Henry Hubler. The Hubler family are on a summer vacation and will be camping on the beach for some relaxation. But in Henry's opinion, it ought to be a traumatizing event. Henry fears the snakes, bugs, spiders, stingers, and blue-ringed octopi. But there is something above all these fears he's shaking thinking about the thought. The object his parents are forcing him to use while they are away. A bicycle that had no training wheels for support. Henry waited for a moment to be brave. His courage darkened and slowly faded away. Enter Cassie. Cassie, who is clever, funny, and makes everything in the world possible in a way. Henry's new, unexpected friend suddenly turns his whole vacation upside down and shows Henry his inner courage. This hilarious character sees the whole event as a theme park opportunity. So if you are ever going on a family vacation you're dreading, make sure you bump into Cassie and Henry.
Another 6 outstanding reviews. Thank you so much to our student reviewers today. Please could you give them a round of applause? Seriously, they're going to put our professional arts reviewers in this country out of a job. Now, the time has come to announce the winners of the Younger Readers Book of the Year category. So these are fresh in your mind because you've just heard all of those fantastic reviews. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the winner of the Younger Readers Book of the Year 2018 is How to Be by Bren McDibble. Now, a little bit of trivia that some of you might not know. Bren McDibble is actually the same person who wrote In the Dark Spaces under the name Callie Black. She uses a different name for her young adult and her younger readers' book. So a big day for Bren McDibble, and huge congratulations to her. Now, again, we have 2 honour books as well to announce today, and they are Henrietta and the Perfect Night by Martine Murray and Marsh and Me by Martine Murray. A big day for Martine Murray as well. Now, the time has come, sadly, to say goodbye to our primary schools joining us through the live stream. I hope you've enjoyed your time. Have a wonderful book week, and from our live audience, a big goodbye. If you all say, if everyone's going to wave and say goodbye. Fantastic. This is possibly the best.